Hi, folks. This week we're covering Chapter 5 and Chapter 8, the Far West, and also federal policy toward Native Americans during the 19th century. And actually, indigenous people feature in both chapters, and um, um, largely the conflict that arises involving Native Americans at its root is about possession of the land. And um, some of what happens I would consider to be sort of deliberate on the part of the government, sort of indefensible um, behaviors such as a whole string of massacres that occur. During the Civil War, you've got the Sand Creek Massacre in eastern Colorado, in which Colorado volunteers under Colonel John Shivington attack Cheyenne community and basically murder men, women, and children. After those people believed that they had made peace with Governor John Evans and the authorities in Denver. And following Sand Creek, we have just sort of an example after example of those sorts of events. There's the so-called Battle of the Washita, which isn't much of a battle. It's really just sort of a slaughter. Um, then you have the in 1876 the Great Sioux War, which features Custer's last stand at the Battle of Little Bighorn, and following that, there's going to be punishment for Plains Indians who had resisted the authorities. And the century ends with the Wounded Knee Massacre, in which a reconstituted 7th Cavalry again kills men, women, and children and puts their bodies into mass graves. Events like those, I think, are pretty clearly deliberate on the part of people with power who are willing to use deadly force, ultimately to get possession of the land. But then you have plenty of examples of what I would consider more sort of bungling on the part of authorities. I can think of two immediate examples in which that happens. One involves the Native Americans who lived where I presently live, the Osage Nation. They're removed in the winter of 1871, 71, and placed on a new reservation in what's now Oklahoma and Indian Territory. And the federal authorities initially placed them in the wrong location. So they have to be removed again a year later after they've started constructing houses and clearing fields and fencing and doing all that work. That was all for naught. But then after they were located on the correct territory, their agent, Isaac Gibson, insisted that they basically become dirt farmers. The Osage people were traditionally equestrians. They practice agriculture, but they're also buffalo hunters, and they really didn't want to become stereotypical 19th century farmers. They were basically pressured into attempting to shift their way of life away from hunting and towards strictly sort of conventional 19th century agriculture. And in the early 1870s, you had drought and grasshopper plagues that devastated farming both for natives and for white settlers. And ultimately, there was a sort of a total failure of the crops on the Osage Reservation. And their agent told them, in effect, now you have to go hunting, go north, cross into Kansas, and hunt buffalo because there's nothing here for you to eat. And it's sort of an illustration, I think, to the native people that they've been told that the white man's way was better, superior, more civilized. But now we're being told to resort to our traditional hunting skills because I guess farming didn't work out. That wasn't intentional, but when Osage hunters cross into Kansas, the governor of Kansas, Thomas Osborne, basically calls out the Kansas National Guard, the militia. And you have something called the Osage War, which I wrote an article about, which really isn't a war. It's simply an attack on people trying to do what they were told, which is hunt buffalo to get food. Then there's another example in the middle part of the country, and that involves the Pawnee. who lived up in central Nebraska. They had a reservation of roughly 50,000 acres or so at the time of their removal. And the federal government and the state of Nebraska wanted them out, wanted them removed to Indian territory. They had already basically surrendered themselves to federal authority, given up their weapons. They were supposed to be protected by the federal government, but they were being preyed upon by war bands of Sioux, who were traditional enemies. And so the Pawnee were removed. They were forced to sell the reservation. They were moved to central Oklahoma. And the authorities there insisted that they not practice their traditional agriculture, but grow wheat and a crop for market, part of the market economy. And so rather than subsistence farming, they grew wheat. Conditions were bad. Their crops failed. And in the middle of winter, the money ran out to run the Pawnee Reservation. And the Pawnee people, men, women, children, elders, were told basically that there was nothing for them there. Congress had not appropriated promised money to support them through the winter. And they were literally told to go out and beg or hunt and support themselves. And the employees of the Pawnee Reservation literally left. They weren't getting paid because there were no appropriations. And for a period of about 6 months, Pawnee men futilely tried to hunt buffalo that were now extinct, basically, on the Central Plains. And women and children and elders went door to door and asked for charity. And eventually, federal appropriations came in, and they were allowed to return to the reservation. But the style of agriculture that had been suggested to them over their own traditional growing of crops was an utter failure. And again, this was a supposedly superior people telling sort of an inferior culture what to do, and that advice turning out to be misplaced. So I hope you had a great week and enjoy your weekend. I'll talk to you folks later.